would be the latitudinal lines projected on the celestial sphere. Now, what happens during the equinox is that it is an event where the ecliptic, which is the apparent path of the sun, intersects with the celestial equator. Now, the celestial equator, for those of you who are Freemasons, you know how we have two globes that we frequently reference, or we reference regularly. We have a terrestrial globe and a celestial globe. And these, I think, are, sidebar, I think these are one of the most hermetic symbols that we have in the lodge, in the lodge room, because it plainly speaks of the relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm, which is so important to our work and so important to some of the tangential studies that some of us do around Freemasonry. So the equinox has contributed to culture, religion, mythology, etc. Now, there's one other, before we move on from that sort of astronomical description of it, there's one other event, a celestial event, that has shaped the symbolism of civilization equally as long as that of the vernal equinox, and that is a phenomenon known as axial precession. And axial precession is very difficult to explain, but it has to do with the wobble of the Earth's axis. And over time, that equinoctial point that we talked about, that 0 hour right ascension, as NASA would say, the first point of Aries, that point has imperceptibly moved. Over the course of 72 years, it moves 1 degree out of a full 360 degrees. It takes 72 years to move 1 degree, and it precedes just a little bit. And over 2,160 years, it moves 30 degrees. And then over, it's over 25,920 years, it moves a full 360 degrees back to where it started. So that is what's called the equinoctial point. And the reason why I'm bringing up precession right now is because it has to do with the vernal equinox, but it has to do with a longer sort of, I guess you can call it an epicycle, just a longer cycle that has equally shaped the symbolism of many civilizations and theologies and mythologies, etc. So let's talk about culture. Now I'm moving into another slide here. Okay, I pretty much blasted through all this, but if you could see my screen, you see the equator right here. It's a straight line. And you see this sine wave. There's a wave that happens. This is the equinoctial point, if everybody could see that. This is the equinoctial point. This moves to the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. That's 23.5 degrees right there. The whole thing is from tropic to tropic, that's 47 degrees. But it goes up 23.5 degrees to what you might think of in the vicinity of St. John the Baptist's Day here at the summer solstice. And then back to the autumnal equinox right here on its way back below the equator, down here to the winter solstice in the vicinity of St. John the Evangelist's day, his feast day right here. And back up to complete a solar year here at the vernal equinox again, where we started. So there's a sine wave traced against the Earth. And you see it on a lot of old maps and a lot of old globes. They tend to not show that too much anymore. I'm not sure why. I doubt there's anything nefarious about it, but maybe they figure everybody knows that. So here is a celebration of Akitu. Akitu, they're saying Chaldean New Year here. It's actually a Babylonian uh, vernal equinox celebration. And actually today in Iran, actually the Shia Muslims celebrate a holiday called Nowruz. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's Navruz, something like that. Newruz. And it means it's the vernal equinox and it is their new year. So they still have an intact system celebrating the vernal equinox on the new year. The reason why I say intact is because that's the original new year all over the place. That's New Year's Day. And one way that you can tell that is by, you know how it's in March. It's March, let's say 20th, right? That's about the average day that the vernal equinox happens. So if you count March as one, March, April, May, June, July, August, September would be the 7th month. October would be the 8th month. November would be the 9th month, and December would be the 10th month. So you see how September, October, November, and December actually make sense when you start at the vernal equinox. If you were to start the year there, all of a sudden, the names of our months make sense again. Whereas they kind of got screwed up, I think, with the, was it the Julian? But the Roman calendar was right. The Julian and the Gregorian moved it to Janus, January, the god of beginnings and endings. Hence his two faces, Janus, thresholds he guarded. So whenever we see these bunnies and these eggs and the flowers and the return of vegetation and fertility, we think of Easter, we think of the spring, we think of fertility, and we think of these eggs. And we think, you know, it comes from ovulation. So there's a Latin word, ovulum, which means little egg, right? And that's where we get the term ovulation. You know, of course, the rabbits are there. We know how prolific rabbits are with their fertility and their reproduction. There's also, you know, spring has always been, it's in a biological, it's in the biological clock of all mammals, I guess, probably more than just mammals, but that's a time of reproduction, particularly animals that experience estrus. Human beings actually do not experience estrus or heat, but the estrus cycle etymologically is related to Eos and Easter. So we'll talk about that in a minute, get into some of the etymological peculiarities about Easter. And here's where some of it comes from. And before you think I'm going to do that Ishtar thing, I know that that's not true. There was a meme out years and years ago, pretty early meme, I guess, that said, "Oh, you're celebrating Easter, you silly person. That's actually Ishtar," you know, which is false. That etymologically, Ishtar and Easter are not related at all. But what is strange is that archetypally and mythologically, they are connected. And they're connected through these two goddesses we see here, Eostre, or probably Yastre, you might call her, and Ostara. Ostara and Eostre. These were the Northumbrian and Germanic goddesses of fertility and of the spring. And through them, through a process called syncretization, they are in fact related to Venus, who is a fertility goddess, who is also related to Aphrodite. If you go back further, Venus subsumed, as they would say, all the characteristics of Aphrodite in the Roman pantheon. And before that, you have then you start to have goddesses like Ishtar and Inanna. So if you go all the way back to Sumer, ancient Sumer, around right around 5,000-6,000 years ago, a long time ago, in the vicinity of the Anno Lucas, you find statuary dedicated to Inanna, and Inanna was a fertility goddess. She was subsumed by Ishtar, and etc., all the way up through the chain. So no, Ishtar's name did not inspire the name Easter, the name of the holiday, but Eostre and Ostara actually did. And you'll see all the little bunnies and the cherubim right here, and the flowers and symbols of fertility. We were talking about estrus earlier. Estrus is more tied to this this equinoctial cycle than we are as humans. The human female does not experience estrus, but it is defined as, and I had to write this down, estrus is defined as a regularly recurrent state of sexual receptivity during which the female of most mammals will accept the male and is capable of conceiving. So what that comes from a Latin word, estrus, O-E-S-T-R-U-S, estrus. And it means frenzy or gadfly. That's why I'm showing this gadfly here, because the gadfly bothers, cows and oxen and sheep and farm animals, and probably people too, but stinging them, and the Greeks imagined this, and the Latins presumably as well, imagined this as being analogous to the sexual urges or sexual impulses. And did you know that the menstrual cycle as well, a lunar cycle, menstrual, menses, the moon, the month, the menstrual cycle is also metered by the ebb and flow of estrogen. So this happens in mammals, human mammals, human female mammals, it is so named because of the hormone's ability to inspire the state of estrus. So this is one of my this is one of my faves. This comes from Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall. And it is a J. Augustus Knapp painting. He did all the artwork for Manly Hall. And this is just a tremendous painting because he really tied in so many different, now you look at these and you see, okay, there's the Christian emblem, the Lamb of God, right? And then you see Ezekiel's vision right here, or the four living creatures of John of Patmos's vision in Revelation. You also see Jupiter Ammon right over here with the ram's horns, and you see the golden calf that was worshipped, and you see probably Apis or Hathor, one of the bulls from the Egyptian religious iconography in front of the pyramid here. I'm not sure who this guy is, just relaxing back here. But you see this this Hebrew priest, or Jewish priest rather, with the menorah, the 7-branched candlestick, and on his chest he has what's called the Urim and Thummim. That's called it. It's 12 jewels on a breastplate, and I think they gave him oracular powers. He was able to use those for as an oracle. And then you have, this is probably, judging by the curvature of that sword and the turban, I would say that this is, he's crushing idols too. So this must be Muhammad right here. And then you have this bull, an Orphic bull, it must be. The reason why I say he's Orphic is because he's cracking open the egg of the year, which I'm pretty sure is an Orphic concept. It's Egyptian as well, but Egyptian via Orphism, if I'm not mistaken. And then in the foreground here, we have Mithras slaying the bull. Now, I will tell you right now that all of these emblems, all of these religious emblems can be interpreted from the perspective of the vernal equinox and axial precession. So all of these symbols here have something to do with the vernal equinox and axial precession. And I'm sure J. Augustus Knapp did that by design, but he added everything. I mean, so everything we think of as these religious symbols, I will explain, have something to do with the vernal equinox and axial precession, which is the movement of the vernal equinoctial point. If we have to go back to this picture, I will, but I cover a lot of it in these slides that are about to follow. So let's start with that one of Mithras. This image here is called the Tauroctony. It is Mithras, who is a solar anthropomorphization, a solar personification, who is slaying the bull. Now this, one way of reading this particular symbol set here, this particular Mithraic iconography is that Mithras is the sun slaying the bull. So he is in the vernal equinox in Taurus. This is the vernal equinox, the sun in Taurus at the vernal equinox. The reason why you know it's the vernal equinox, so there's no mistake about it, if you were to see Canis Major, Hydra, the water snake, and Scorpio, and then going back, this actually, you could go and look at this, find a star map, and you'll see that these very constellations line up in that order. Canis Major, Hydra, and Scorpio line up in that order when the sun was at the equinoctial point in Taurus. That is a fact. So it's pretty much unmistakable that this is a sort of allegory for the vernal equinox in Taurus. And on either side here, you have Cautis and Cautopates, they're called. So look at Cautis is the summer solstice because his torch is up. Cautopates is the winter solstice because his torch is down. It's unmistakable, you know, and they flank this equinoctial point. There's an emblem in Freemasonry, has a big circle right here and two lines. So Freemasons will know that this means, you know, with these two lines and these solstitial markers on both lines, and then this circle with the point in the center and the space delineated by the east with the volume of sacred law. We'll get into that image a little later. So here we have, so due to axial precession, after the Taurian age, that 2,160-year period that the vernal equinox would have taken place in Taurus, we move into the Aryan age. That's A-R-I-A-N, Aryan age, over pertaining to Aries, you might say. So we move into this Aryan age for another period of 2,160 years for the vernal equinoctial point to be occurring in the 30-degree segment of the zodiacal sign of Aries. I know that this gets a little dense, and I'm trying to keep it really basic, but I think you see where I'm going with this, is that you know, the religious symbolism around particular precessional ages, those 2,160-year periods, are made pretty obvious if we look at the symbol sets during that time. Like here it is after we moved from the Aryan age into what's called the Piscean age with a hard C, the Piscean age. We see Christ, but note that he sometimes went by the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. The reason why he went by and he was the Lamb of God, he was simultaneously the Lamb of God and the Fisher of men. He was the Lamb of God. A lamb is a baby ram, by the way, a juvenile ram. He was the Lamb of God and the Fisher of men because he straddled the line from the Aryan age to the Piscean age. He ended the Aryan age and began the Piscean age. And remember, this goes backwards through the zodiac. So he is the beginning, because Aries is 0 hour, right ascension, and the end, because that 360th degree is Pisces in that circle. So he's the beginning and the end. He is the Lamb of God and the Fisher of men, because his 2,160-year period commenced at the very border of that line. And you'll see this in his emblems, such as this what's it called? Mandorla, the Italians call it, a mandorla. We know it probably more as a Vesica piscis. Vesica with a V, but pronounced like a W. Vesica piscis, hard C. And that means fish bladder. It's you can form it by 2 circles. You see how this would complete a circle? You could, and you'll see this in what's called a Venn diagram. You've probably seen Venn diagrams before where they overlap. And you know his name, Ichthus. Ichthus. You ever see a Jesus fish, which is also shaped like a Vesica piscis, and it has a iota, a chi, a theta, epsilon, I think it is, and a sigma. And these form an acrostic that spell out the word ichthus, which in Greek means fish. Not to mention things like the feeding of the 5,000 and the 2 fishermen. I mean, there's just so much Piscean stuff in Jesus's mythology or story. So so we handled a lot of the religious and theological stuff. Let's just do a little bit of the sort of what we'd think of as comparative mythological stuff, which is also religious. The lines are blurred here, but we have Bat, B-A-T, who was subsumed. Remember how certain gods subsume the qualities of other gods. The qualities of Bat, a Taurian age Egyptian goddess, were subsumed by that of Hathor. So this is Bat and Hathor, or I think this is Bat and this is Hathor, one of the two. And there's a lot of, during that 2,160-year period in world mythology and comparative mythology, from about 4,000 BCE to about 2,000 BCE, there's just a preponderance of bovine symbolism, I guess, or Taurian symbolism due to that precessional age. One of the main ones we see is in Knossos, Knossos, Knossos in Crete, where maybe you know the story. Pasiphae is impregnated. Zeus sends a bull to impregnate Pasiphae, who is the queen of Knossos, whose king is Minos. And she has a half bull, half human baby who is called the Minotaur, because these are the Minoan people. Minos, Minoan, Minotaur. And King Minos was very embarrassed about this, so he had a guy named Daedalus construct this labyrinth. And Daedalus was a genius, and he made this impenetrable labyrinth, and he deposited the Minotaur inside of it. And once every year, they would have to take, I don't know what it was, 9 or 11 or 12, or probably some astrological number of sacrifices, and lead them into there to appease and placate the Minotaur, this bloodthirsty animal. And Theseus, if you know the story, that's this guy who's slaying this bull. Now, in the context of solar anthropomorphizations and bull-like creatures, wouldn't you say that this is most likely, I'm going to make up a word, a mythologization? Does that work? A mythologization of mythologizing of a celestial event, really. Here's a little more, going from that pre-classical to a more classical era of Greek mythology. We find this is known as the rape of Europa, where Zeus made himself into a bull to carry away this young woman who he was infatuated with. And over here, this is one of my favorites, because here is Zeus, and here is his wife, Hera, who used to get very upset about Zeus's extramarital trysts that he seemed to have with great regularity. So he was laying down with this woman named Io, Io. And Hermes, who was right here, who was kind of just hanging out and making sure the coast was clear, was like, I could cover her up or whatever. And Zeus is like, I've got an idea. I'll just turn her into a bull right now, or a cow of some sort. And Hera will never suspect anything. But what's strange is Hera ended up finding out about it, that this was indeed Io. And what did Hera send to bug Io for the rest of her days as a cow, but a gadfly, an estrus fly, to bug Io, literally bug her. So, but at the end of that period, we're getting near the end of the Taurian age here, mythologically, and we'll find that all of a sudden, these people were still worshiping the golden calf, a Taurian age symbol, when Moses, who I think this is him saying, why are you doing this? Look at this. This is wrong. We're in the ram's age, he said. So he pulled it. We're in the age of the ram, the Aryan age. So he pulled out his shofar, they call this horn. And it is, you guessed it, it is a ram's horn. And he blew the ram's horn to usher in the vernal equinox occurring in Aries for a period of 2,160 years, ushered in, theologically, mythologically. Does it really make a difference? I mean, I don't want to even get into that. I mean, there's some literalism, but there's also some, we can interpret this stuff. So he blows the ram's horn. Simultaneously, in both Upper and Lower Egypt, we have Khnum, the ram god, and we have Amun-Ra. Amun-Ra. This is from the Avenue of Sphinxes at the Temple of Amun-Ra, or Amun-Re sometimes, in Luxor, Egypt. And it is an Aryan Age structure. So now we're into some fun stuff because we're near the end here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Freemasonry. Now I have what might be an unpopular opinion. I know it is shared by some, but it is definitely not shared by all. And I'll tell you, it's just my opinion. But I think that I'm going to go ahead and do not a complete catch-all definition, but I will say that if you are quarrying, raising, dressing, transporting, and setting and finishing worked stone, and you are putting this in a structure that is astronomically or astrologically oriented in some way, and particularly if you are doing this to call down upon cosmic sympathies that have to do with the relationship between the terrestrial plane and the celestial plane. If you are doing that, if you are doing operative stonemasonry, but also doing speculative elements like astronomical and astrological orientation, like the mirroring of constellations on the ground, i.e. the Giza Plateau and the three Menkaure, Khafre, and Khufu. Is that right? Menkaure? The three pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Robert Bauval's Orion thesis, that his Orion correlation thesis, where he posits that they were mirroring the three stars in Orion's belt on the ground. Now, even if that's not true, there are other ones that are true, like Chichen Itza here and Stonehenge. They are oriented to celestial events, and they are megalithic structures made from worked and quarried stones. And there are tens, if not hundreds, of sites around the world that betray signs of astrological orientation and temporal markers in worked stone raised by Masons and set by Masons. Now, here's my unpopular opinion. I would say that if you do both of those things, you are partaking of both operative and speculative Masonry. And if you're partaking of both of those things, then by any other name, whether you're a ritualist, whether there are mysteries involved with it, which there certainly are, because you had to know certain things, like if you're going to orient a structure, then you have to know things like this. You have to know how to arrive at true north. Now, maybe Joe Martinez is on here, because we were just talking about this sort of thing. He did a brilliant presentation on the pillars just the other night. I sat in on it, and I was just really impressed with his level of work there. One thing we were talking about a little later, though, is that one of the objects of having these two pillars, and whether they're obelisks or whether they're actual pillars, note that these two obelisks, which flanked the pylons, or the sort of face between the doors, between them was the door to a temple with two pylons, with the pylon and two pillars on either side of it. Note that the obelisks were not load-bearing pillars. Just like the pillars of King Solomon's temple, non-load-bearing pillars. Why were they non-load-bearing? Were they just there for ornamentation? What were they there for, right? These were put there, and I think even Vitruvius would say this, as analemata, or gnomons. Gnomons, gnomons. A gnomon is the part of a sundial that casts a shadow. So you can, by using two perpendicularly raised pillars on a level plane at a right angle, so horizontal, right angle, and perpendicular. You can take these two, and at the summer solstice, it's going to cast a shadow this way. At the winter solstice, this one's going to cast a shadow this way. And where they intersect vis-a-vis these two pillars or obelisks is going to be true north. That's going to be how you will orient your temple. And you would probably, if I was an ancient builder, I would probably leave these here as a proof of my work. I would say, you know what, my temple is squared. You know, after I got true north, I called upon the rope stretchers, what they called, if I can get this name right, they were called the Harpodene or something like that. There was a certain class of Egyptian builder. They were the rope stretchers, and these were the guys who, once the architects deduced true north, then the rope stretchers would come in and they would then square the temple. They would use a 3, 4, 5 length of rope, and other methods as well. But one of them, to get a right angle coming off of that central axis, because they had to do both an X and a Y axis, right, in order to truly mark out their temple. I'm getting too deep into that, but you see what I'm saying, I think. But they're solstitial. They're these two things. They're Cautis and Cautopates in the Tauroctony of Mithras. They're also St. John the B, St. John the E. And look, and you know, there's an argument in Pike where he says, no, they couldn't possibly, Pike says this, no, they couldn't possibly represent the solstices because this is pointing north, right? But isn't that the modern view of cartography, that we would consider north up here? In the ancient world, and particularly putting the VSL right here, all orientation was east. So if this is east, if this is the vernal equinox, the sun rising in the east, then these 2 points are the solstices. And the solstices, St. John the Baptist Day is the summer solstice. His feast is around that time. And the feast of St. John the Evangelist is the winter solstice. And that's the east. We're almost there. So you ever see our cornerstones? On our cornerstones, they're all over the place, right? And not only did they put the Era Vulgaris or whatever, or the Anno Domini, you would call this, of the year that we recognize, or a lot of anybody would recognize, but they also put the Anno Lucas, and the Anno Lucas means the year of light. So obviously it's 4,000 years older than this one. So what does that date mean? What is 4,000 BCE? I'll tell you, it is approximately the commencement of the Taurian age. That's when the vernal equinox, that celestial event we've been talking about this whole time, was occurring in Taurus. That was 4,000 BCE. Why do we venerate that Taurian age so much, particularly in Freemasonry? If you want the answer to that question, well, you'll have to buy my book, because that's where it is. This stuff I'm going to blast through real quick, but there's a lot of vernal equinoctial stuff about this image and its corresponding allegory. This right here, and that's in my book as well. So this stuff's in my book. But this right here is, you see this? This is a lion, a bull, an eagle, and a man. So the lion is Leo, the bull is Taurus, the eagle is Scorpio, anciently conflated with the eagle because of Aquila, and the man is Aquarius, right? So you have the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac on an equinoctial and solstitial axes right here. And what are they between? They're between these two, again, sort of these solstitial androsphinxes. You would call these an androsphinx. So they're eagles and they're rams or goats. They're probably goats because the goat is Capricorn. And look at these tools by which you raise obelisks in front of your pylon at your Egyptian temple, and then later your Phoenician temple, and then later, even later than that, your Jewish temple. So there's certainly some unmistakably astrological stuff going on here. Obviously, right? Ezekiel's vision, the 4 living creatures, etc. This is the end, beautiful friend. But the last thing I wanted to say about this comes from an amazing book called Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy. 1889, I want to say, 1889, by a man, a very mysterious guy named Robert Hewitt Brown. And boy, what a book that is. You ever have one of those moments, remember watching The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis when he drops his, pardon me if I'm spoiling this for you, but he like drops his ring at one point and then you're like, oh my God, this guy's been dead the whole time. And it's like a mind blower. Well, when I was reading Robert Hewitt Brown's Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy, there were no less than 10 times where I had to put the book down and be like, oh my God, how did I miss that? How did I not know that? But so there's just a wealth of stuff going on here and in that book and in my book. My book's good too. This is all I have. So if everything's cool with Bo and the rest of the gang, worshipful brother Bo, I'm going to hand it back over to you. And if we want to do a Q&A, if we'd like to do it via comments, or if we think we can keep it one at a time, with audio.
I'm going to go ahead and just ask everybody to type their questions in. Let's see who's got a question, and then I'll unmute people individually so they can ask you their question directly.
Am I still sharing?
Yeah, go ahead and unshare past.
Where is
there
the?
We go.
There
we go. You did it. You're good.
Okay.
Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go unmute Joe so he can respond to the comment about the obelisks.
Joe?
What's up, brother?
Hey, brother.
Yeah, no, I didn't have anything to add. That was excellently done, and fantastic job as always.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for your talk the other night. It's pretty timely. Like, I'm glad I'm not stepping on your toes with my pillar stuff. You know, like we stayed out of each other's way, and that was that was nice. Thanks, brother.
We have a question that from Jeremy. Let me go to Jeremy. Jeremy, you are unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the 2 pillars and the symbolism of the 2 pillars in relation to Jachin and Boaz.
Well, I would say, you mean the 2 obelisks?
Yes, sorry, the 2 obelisks, yes.
Yeah, I would say that, like I alluded to when we were talking about it, they're being non-load bearing. Here's a little tidbit I've got about that. If you read in, what is it, Chronicles and 1 Kings, I think is the 2 places where it shows up most. Chronicles and 1 Kings, you'll find that if you're standing at the door of King Solomon's temple, let me see if I get this straight. If you're standing at the door, you're actually facing west. So if you have the 2 pillars on either side of you and you're looking in towards this Sanctum Sanctorum, the sun is at your back. So the sun rise would actually, just as in Egyptian temples, the sun rises to illuminate the sanctum sanctorum. So now here's something strange is why do you think in Masonic lodges, and I think I could talk about this, this is not too deep doctrine or whatever. So why do you think, this is rhetorical, why do you think that the Masonic lodge room is reversed? And I have a theory about that. I, in fact, talk about it in both books, the new book that's coming out and my last book. I expand on it greatly in the new book, but I think that they're facing the opposite direction because the Masonic lodge maybe is a commentary on man's position vis-a-vis deity, in that man, by nature of, by virtue of his own works, can strive for perfection. Now, there's a lot of that in Freemasonry, and in that regard, there's a lot of what would you call it? I want to say sort of a Gnostic kind of idea that we don't necessarily require divine intercession. And when I say Gnostic, I don't mean that icky dualism type Gnostic. I'm not talking about that kind of earth-hating, material-hating Gnosticism, but the very idea of gnosis. And I think that there's some of that in, I think there's a commentary of that in the reversal of our, I did a much better job explaining this in the book. So.
Read the book. I got another question here from Briggs Cunningham.
Brother Briggs.
Hey, Jamie, thank you very much for the presentation. That was phenomenal. Just like your opinion on something, you made the hair stand up on the back of my neck when you brought up the builders. And whether we're talking any builders in the past, the Hindu builders, the great temples that we have around the world and the perfection put into them, but also all the esoteric imagery, stories, etc. I agree with you 100%. I would even go as far as saying they might have even have reached realization building these temples, being there all day long in the moment, working the stone, looking at the symbols, etc. What do you think? Thank you.
Thanks, Briggs. I think, like I said, the application of astrological and astronomical considerations in temple building. And granted, some of these temples, I don't want to get too crazy because I could definitely go into like Graham Hancock world with megalithic structures and ancient advanced. I'm not an alien guy. Joe Martinez is an alien guy. I'm not an alien guy, but I am. I might be an ancient advanced civilization guy. So because look at these structures that we couldn't possibly move some of these. Stephanie and I, my wife and I, were just in Peru and Bolivia last year. And we went to Sacsayhuaman, we did Machu Picchu, we went to La Paz, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, the whole bit. We did all of those things down there. And we saw some stones that would be so impossible to move. These people didn't even have the wheel, But again, I don't want to go down that whole thing. And I mean, look no further than Baalbek, Lebanon. How ridiculously, I know Hamza might be on here right now, and he could probably tell you the metric tons of that one stone. I think he's even from the Baalbek area or lived there at some point. I'm done.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Roger Beatty, did you have a question? And I have to unmute him.
I see Ted Cross as well. Roger or Ted?
I got Roger. Hold on a second. Let me go to Fritz has a question as well. Fritz, for some reason, I'm having a hard time. I don't see you.
Oh, wait, here's one. Bo, somebody's saying Joe Spanola is saying the aliens and the lizards are the same thing. I think the lizards are Pleiadians.
I unmuted Joe. Joe, you're live.
I'm sorry, I was just messing with them.
No.
Official question. I'm like, well,
are we talking about the Pleiadians or the Rockefellerian lizard people? There's a big difference.
I mean, the word alien just means different to me, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you really say when you say the word alien?
I was kind of joking, but now you're getting serious about
That's me being serious. I was joking originally, but
I have two other questions for you, Jamie. First, before we keep going, I just want to say if people have to get going, let me just make a couple comments, and then we can keep going as long as we want here. Our next education, as a reminder, is going to be on the Quarry of the Mind presentation on 4th Tuesday of April. On the 28th is Brother Micah Wimmer from Ascension Lodge 89, the same lodge Jamie is from here in Phoenix. And he will be presenting on the soul and corporeal essence or artifact of psyche. And that will again be live and online. Also, I wanted to comment and introduce a couple of people if they're still here. Brother, Right Worshipful Brother Randy Jager. He's our senior Grand Warden here in Arizona. Say hello, Randy. We saw you a little bit earlier.
I cannot unmute myself.
I unmuted you. There you are.
Okay.
We can see you.
Hi,
Welcome.
guys. Great to be here. Enjoyed the presentation. Thank you guys for putting it together. It's wonderful to get together Masonically in these times when I'm jonesing to be at a Masonic function with brothers. So thank you so much for making this available.
Yes, Randy was leading our Grand Lodge leadership retreat, which was supposed to be this weekend, and it got canceled, unfortunately. So we're not going to all be able to meet and hear some of the great presentations he had planned for that. Hopefully, maybe we'll do some more of this later. Then we also have, I don't know if Michael Dale is still here. Michael, you're on. Let me introduce you to Worshipful Brother Michael Dale, our Junior Grand Deacon here in Arizona. Michael, you still with us? He might be. He might have stepped away. And of course, you guys already heard from Worshipful Roger Beatty, our Junior Grand Steward here in Arizona. Say hi, Roger.
Hello again.
Just out of curiosity, this is something we do in Masonry for those of you who aren't Masons yet or from other organizations. We always introduce our Grand Lodge officers. Do we have any other Grand Lodge officers from other jurisdictions here on the call? If so, just drop a note in the comment here real quick. And then as soon as we finish with this, I'll go back to we have at least 3 more questions. Fritz, I'll start with you still as soon as we get there. Adam Goldman. Just Adam, because I'm the same thing. Adam is the Grand Order of DC, and I am the Grand Order of Phoenix, Arizona. Adam, say hello.
Am I in
there? It is.
There you are. Hey, Adam.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Big fan of Brother Jaime Lamb, and we had him out for a wonderful series of presentations. First saw him down in Virginia, and I was so impressed with his work. I invited him to back-to-back presentations in Washington, D.C. So big fan and just absolutely love his work, and very much appreciate what you all are doing in this time of the pandemic when we don't get all the Masonry. GLOs were used to being at a Grand Lodge event almost every night of the week, and so it's amazing what people have been doing right now through the internet. So we very much appreciate it in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Adam.
Absolutely.
Jamie, I'm going to go back to Fritz's question if I could find it real quick. Fritz, I got to go back through. But basically his question was, and I don't know why I can't try unmuting him one more time. His question had to do with why don't we hear more about Celtic history and events when that time frame existed as long as the Egyptian time did. Hold on, I think Prince just reposted his message. Why don't we hear more about the Celtic influences and a lot of this stuff, Jamie? Do you have any theories on that?
I don't, and that maybe seems to be. I know that there are a lot in Western Europe. There are a lot of megaliths. There are a lot of stone structures that are oriented and that were positioned oriented. Look at the word orientation, facing east to orient oneself. I think there is certainly a history there that hasn't been. What's his name? Christopher McClintock. So Fritz, if you're interested in that stuff, look up a guy named Christopher McClintock. He's actually a Facebook friend of mine, and he writes. He's from, I want to say, Northern England, maybe Newcastle or something like that. He's from up there, or Wales, or I'm not sure. But
the Craft and the Cross is what Joe is telling us, by Chris McClintock.
Oh, okay, yeah, but he's got a new one coming out too that deals with megalithic structures. I've private messaged with him, and we're friends. We've talked back and forth, and I know that his work is a little more Anglo-centric or Norse type of stuff. If you're interested in that,
I'm going to unmute Dr. Ted Cross. He had a question. Ted, I'll go ahead and let you ask your question.
Hey, Jamie, great presentation. I'm just wondering about the ram's horn you mentioned in reference to Moses. Does that also become a symbol of the Lamb of God? And how does it find its way into the tabernacle and temple usages?
That I don't know that. I wish I could see you right now. I haven't seen you in probably a year and a half. Where are you? There you are.
Yeah.
Dr. Brother Ted, good to see you. So I think that, I didn't go in the Aryan examination of that symbol set. There is something. Moses, you'll see a lot of old pictures of him, or a lot of old statuary of Moses where he has the two buds right here. You know the ones I'm talking about? And there's somewhere he has full-on horns going back. And there was a conflation. Some of those Jupiter Ammon-isms, Jupiter -Ammon, Jupiter Ammon, I think made it into the Mosaic archetype because of that. So how it made it into the tabernacle, I'm not sure, but there is, of course, when I think of the tabernacle, did you ever do the Royal Arch?
Nope.
All right. There's something in Royal Arch that I think you'd find interesting, but it has more to do with the tetramorph. So it's basically more of the Taurian age stuff, less of the Aryan age. And I think, although, that's a good point. Other than the shofar, the buds, and the Jupiter Ammonisms, I suppose, there's.
You have me thinking. I'm going to go study. I know that often the altar in the temple had horns on each corner. This idea of a horn full of oil as an initiatory sort of cleansing performance. Wow. So I'm going to check that out.
Was the oil Abramelin oil? Was it the oil of the Tanakh?
It may have been.
That's the one that has it's olive oil, cassia,
yes.
calamus or galangal, and myrrh. Yeah, I've actually made it. I've got some that I made, but I used the Mather's recipe, which is has galangal instead of calamus. And some people will tell you it's cannabosum or cannabis. Yeah.
All right, I got another question here from Jorge. Jorge, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question. Jorge and Fariba.
Hi, good evening. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jorge.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. It was a great presentation. I did enjoy it a lot. I have a question for you. Do you think that those old builders that we were mentioned before, related to these old temples, have a relationship with the history of Atlantis?
I would say if we're talking strictly about, I think it's in his Timaeus, right? Plato's Timaeus, where he talks about Solon was in Egypt and told him that approximately 9,000 years earlier there were the Atlanteans, and so there is like an established little thread of literature that kind of backs that up, but taking this absolutely seriously, I would say that Atlantis is more like an allegory for one of those antediluvian, anti-A-N-T-E, before, not anti-against, antediluvian cultures that were wiped out when, sometime during what geologists, I guess, call the Younger Dryas climate period, when there was a rise in sea level 400 feet. So that would have put a lot of, if there's a 400-foot rise in sea level, what do you think is going to happen to all the, where do humans like to look at San Francisco, look at New York, look at LA, look at all over Europe? Everybody's within a few miles of the shoreline. Most people are. Most of civilization is. If there was a 400-foot rise in sea level today, what do you think would happen to most of civilization? You would literally have only hillbillies left, and how would they carry on? So I think Atlantis as a theory or as an allegory is something to be taken seriously. In terms of it being a some sort of Pleiadian reptilian enclave where spaceships take off of, I would say that's probably false. I don't know, or there's no demonstrable proof for that I've seen.
Yeah, I'm going to move to another question, Jamie. You tell me what your timeline is. I got about 20 new messages. We've got a bunch of new questions. I'll keep going as long as you can keep going. I'm going to go to Brother Daniel Larries, who had a question about the Manly P. Hall painting, which I love, by the way. That's one of my favorite as well. Go ahead, Daniel. Oh, there, Daniel, can you speak now?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, brother?
Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Brother Daniel here from Esoterica 316 and Mother Lodge JPL in Dallas. Yeah, so it was a pretty simple question about the Manly P. Hall painting, and yeah, by the way, that is just exquisite.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in there, and it's a really simple one. So Muhammad, he is looking above, and there's just this one candle. By any chance, do you know what that one candle represents out of all the other images?
When I was looking at that when I was putting this slideshow together, and that was sort of the one thing that escaped me as well. So it's pretty interesting that you kind of keyed in on the same thing I keyed in on. It's the one kind of thing that is maybe a little, you know what, let's say this, since Muhammad is looking at it, and there is such a sort of guarded, and I don't mean this of course not derogatorily, but there is such a guarded, jealous monotheism about the worship of Allah, right? It's submission, Islam, right? He is one God, and of course it's an extension, coming through the Zoroastrian, or really Akhenaten and the Aten, through the Zoroastrian Ahura Mazda, through this monotheism that has woven its way through Judaism, through Christianity, and in through the latest manifestation of the Abrahamic tradition, which is Islam, right? So I would say that one way of looking at that single candle is the light of monotheism, which is a unity, which is one.
Yeah, which is what, if I can intercept my own thoughts.
Please.
Something that I've always battled against, between the idea of polytheism and monotheism, and how they don't have to be enemies, because, all the truths exist at the same time, and, for me, my theory is that back in the day, everybody was very separated and doing their own thing. And these enlightened masters, Akhenaten, Muhammad, Zoroaster, and the Jews, were probably trying to get the idea of like, hey guys, we're all united. Unfortunately, it came with a lot of, no, everything else is evil. But in reality, I think the point of the evolution of humanity was to say, hey, yes, like Akhenaten said, yeah, your Apollo and your sun god here, they're all the same solar disk. They are all the Aten. We are all united. Unfortunately, it kind of didn't play out like that. But yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing of what you said. The other thing that I wanted to, oh, please don't let it go out of my head right now.
Write it in the comments and we'll pick it up.
Oh, hey, I don't want to be that guy who like corrects people, but I speak German. And on the word Eoster.
Yeah.
So it's usually umlaut O, and it's
Esther?
It's Öster.
I appreciate it.
Öster.
Yeah. Hey, then maybe you can clear this up for me, because when I was researching the etymology of that word, it also went to the Proto-Indo-European Aus, like as in Austria and Australia, etc. So Aus, and it also went, there's a lineage of there's a cognate of that etymologically with Eos, the Greek Eos, that if you've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, they talk about rosy-fingered dawn. And the rosy-fingered dawn is Eos, which is related to Aus, which is related to Austria, which is related to Öster, which is,
which means east. In German, Ost just means east. So so like the German word for Austria is Österreich, the Eastern Kingdom.
Yeah.
So Öster just means east. And that would make sense with the vernal equinox.
Exactly.
And well, this was a spinner that I could maybe put out there, but since you mentioned obelisks, I've also been doing a little bit of research on the connections between high Catholic ritual, being raised Catholic, and Judaism, and a lot of connections. And so I was recently in August, I went to Rome, and I visited the Tempio Maggiore, the Grand Temple, which is the Jewish temple, and then I went to the Vatican. But some things that I noticed about a Catholic, a typical Catholic church altar, most often has 6 candles, and in the middle there's the crucifix. And to me, that is a Catholic representation of the menorah of the temple, but Christopher.
Sure, and if you think of it in terms of Kabbalistically, you would put Yesu, you would put Jesus in Tifereth, right? And then if you have the sun in the center of a heliocentric model, you have 6 other lights, 6 other governors around the sun. So you would have the other Sephiroth around that. So it makes sense that they would put 6 planets, essentially, in the old terminology, planet as in wanderer, around a central sun, Tifereth, that would be Jesus, the crucifix, uniting these 2 axes. Who else did we have on there? Was there, I didn't want to blow off, hey, but thank you, and thanks for helping out with that German. That's a pro tip.
I loved it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Still got 60 people on. I'm going to unmute everybody real quick. Don't everybody jump in at once. Antonio! Greater Copanetti. Somebody else want to throw something out there?
Wait, we can't unmute everybody.
If people don't know, and you.
Yeah, I muted everybody. It's a little noisy, Jamie. Let me go back. Go back to the question. Does somebody else have a comment and want to ask a question? Jamie, you're unmuted. Let me unmute Jason because I can't believe Jason hasn't talked now. Where you at, Jason? And Vic.
Who's got a question? There were some up there. We're missing them now.
I just mentioned to everybody that you're going to be speaking tomorrow night at Castle Island Virtual Lodge for those lodges that are in amity with Castle Island in Canada. I forget what province that is. Jamie will be speaking at their lodge tonight. I posted a link to their Facebook page.
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry. I was just reading Adam Goldman's comment. Hebraically, menorah, min, sex, or six, right? Min, is that six? And then or, light. Of course, or is light, like AUR, which is
Gold.
regarding the, well, yes, in French, or deor, of gold, or yeah, but is min six in anybody know Hebrew?
Adam, you're on mute again.
Am I on mute?
You said min sex.
Yeah,
and then
min is the word for sex. Yeah, mem.
Mem is water.
Well, yeah, but mem. I'm trying to think of the letter in the middle. Maybe Bob Noon, but min mean. Oh, I'm sorry. You said mem. Min means sex, and or means obviously light, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you look at the menorah, what you're seeing, if you turn the menorah on its side, you actually see the 7 chakras.
Ah.
So it's kind of as above, so below. When you're looking at the menorah, you're looking at it from the top down.
Right. Yeah, I've been thinking about, I'm way more comfortable with endocrine glands, than saying chakra. I mean, I don't, only because I don't understand it. It's outside of my...
It's the tree of life, just slightly rearranged, right? So, I mean,
right.
You still have a root chakra at Yesod, and you still have a crown chakra.
I see. Oh, it's the middle pillar, no?
Well, it's the middle pillar, but then you're also moving some stuff from severity and mercy into the middle.
For sure, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
I just got a note from Brad Drew. Tomorrow night's meeting for Castle Island Lodge is on the level meeting, so it's education, not a tiled meeting. 7 p.m. He posted the Zoom link in the chat, so go ahead and grab that, guys, if you'd like to go tomorrow night. Thank you, Brad. Jamie, I had a question for you. Just going back to the artwork. That's probably one of my favorite parts when I'm into Masonry. I'm into the history, and I'm always fascinated with the artwork and how these concepts of, what do you want to call them, pagan religious concepts art into modern day. Do you think those carry through into some of the modern day artwork we're using in Freemasonry?
Paganisms?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean...
the artwork specifically. Are there pieces of art that have really influenced Masonry and the imagery that we were using in Masonry?
Artwork, are you talking about our tracing boards? What would you consider Masonic visual?
Boards, the visual and symbols that permeate, like St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. I don't know. I know that they're both associated with major pagan feasts, right?
No, I would say that there's paganisms all over the lodge, and I would say that they have to do with not only these sort of astro-mythological motifs that we have, but also things like look at the classicalism, right? Or the classicism of the lodge. We have the orders of architecture. So if you look at the Doric order, that's sacred to Mars. So there you have Aries, Mars. If you look at the Ionic order, that's sacred to Athena. Which they use Ionic in houses of learning and libraries and things like that. It's the common order. Vitruvius would use them in libraries and schools. If you look at the Corinthian order, that's beauty. So you have wisdom, Ionic, strength, the Doric, Mars, Aries, and beauty, Aphrodite, the Corinthian, which is more ornate with the acanthus leaves and things like that. So there's 3 solid paganisms right there in the Greek orders of architecture, the 3 in the center. There's also on the jewels. The jewels. Look at the jewel of the historian is a parchment and a quill, which is very close to the scribe that is the stylus and the palette of Thoth Hermes or of Thoth. There was always a scribe, and there's always some sort of like a reed pen and a tablet, like for I forget his name, who the Babylonian Hermes was. Nabu. So Nabu had a tablet and a reed pen to do cuneiform. There's those sort of comparative mythological paganisms all over the place. Here's a good one. The rods of the stewards have a cornucopia in them. The cornucopia is associated with Demeter. It is associated with Amalthea, the she-goat, because of her horn. The she-goat, Amalthea, she suckled Zeus when he was an infant, and she is very closely associated with the cornucopia. And the pine cone, Albert Mackey says that the pine cone is also a motif that's found in some of the steward's rods, or maybe in the deacon's rods, I forget which, but he says that a pine cone image, and that is of course Dionysian, right, or Bacchic, depending on Greek or Roman. But the pine cone is exactly what's called the thyrsus. The thyrsus was the rod that the Maenads, or the priest of the Maenads, the Bacchic or Dionysian priest, would have the thyrsus, followed by the crazed, drunken Maenads who would rip men apart like they ripped Orpheus apart. There's just tons and tons of ways you could spin out from the Masonic vantage point on classical paganisms. They're literally everywhere.
All right, I think that's all. We don't have any other questions, so
okay.
Thank you very much, Jamie. You get better every single time.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and maybe we'll see some of you tomorrow.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Night.